The carousel's calliope music was a ghost, a thin, reedy whisper warped by decades of wind and rain. For Leo, the sound was a siren's call. He stood at the rusted iron gates of the old-world Fairgrounds, a place that had been the zenith of joy a century past and was now a monument to decay. His grandfather, on his deathbed, had pressed a tarnished brass token into his hand. "What lies beneath?" the old man had rasped, his eyes wide with a fear that death hadn't yet erased. "Don't let it out." Leo had spent a year researching, piecing together clues from old blueprints and newspaper archives that spoke of strange disappearances and a sudden, unexplained closure in 1923. Now, with bolt cutters in hand, he severed the chain. The groan of the gate was a protest from the past. Inside, the fairgrounds were a skeletal graveyard. The roller coaster's track was a broken spine against the twilight sky. Paint peeled from game booths in great, leprous sheets, revealing the rotten wood beneath. The air was thick with the smell of wet rust and old earth. And beneath it all, a vibration, so low it was felt more than heard, thrummed through the soles of his boots. He followed the sound, and the faint, phantom calliope music to its source, the carousel. Its platform was sagging, its once proud steeds, now frozen in expressions of agony, their painted eyes staring into nothing. In the center was the calliope itself, a pipe organ with keys that dipped and rose on their own, playing a discordant, mournful tune. Leo's research had hinted at a basement, a maintenance level never included on public maps. He found the hatch. Concealed beneath the carousel's central dais, an iron ring set into the wood. With a heave, it opened, releasing a breath of air so cold and foul it made him gag. A set of narrow stone steps descended into absolute blackness. The calliope's music faded, replaced by a new sound from below, a soft, rhythmic, metallic click-clack. Click-clack. He descended, his flashlight beam a frail sword against the oppressive dark. The stairs opened into a vast, brick-lined tunnel. It wasn't a maintenance corridor. It was a passageway, old and damp, its walls strung with ancient electrical wires that hummed with residual power. The click-clack was louder here, echoing from up ahead. The tunnel led to a cavernous space, and Leo's breath caught in his throat. It was a museum of the fair's darkest secrets. Glass display cases held twisted, unrecognizable metal shapes. Ledgers lay open, their pages filled not with financial records, but with intricate anatomical drawings of things that were not human, annotated in a frantic, spidery script. And in the center of the room stood the source of the sound. It was a massive, complex machine of brass gears, spinning glass orbs, and articulated arms. It was dormant now, but its purpose was horrifyingly clear. It was a prison. At its heart, suspended in a cage of crackling energy fed by wires that snaked back into the earth, was a shifting, shadowy form. It had no fixed shape, but in its fleeting coalescence, Leo saw glimpses of the carousel horse's agony, the distorted funhouse mirrors, the manic grin of a clown's poster upstairs. This was the fair's true engine? The entity, unearthed during the fair's construction, was a psychic parasite, a being that fed on joy and reflected back a distorted, amplified version of it. The founders hadn't shut it down, they had harnessed it. The overwhelming euphoria of the fairgrounds, the reason it was hailed as the happiest place on earth, was a forced extraction. It fed on the laughter of children, the thrill of couples, the wonder of the crowds, but it demanded a price. The ledgers told the rest. The disappearances, a child who wandered off, a maintenance worker, a prize-winning baker weren't accidents. They were payments. The machine, and the men who operated it, had to sat the entity's hunger for more than just emotion. It required a physical anchor, a soul to bind the energy it consumed. Leo's grandfather had been one of those men, a young engineer hired to maintain the miracle machine, who had realized too late the horrific cost of the miracle. The click-clack sound came from a small, subsidiary device on the machina clockwork counter, tallying down. Leo shone his light. On it, the counter read 0:01. As he watched, it clicked over to 0 o'clock. A deep silence fell. Then the massive machine shuddered to life. Gears ground against gears. The glass orbs glowed with a sickly green light. The entity in the core began. to thrash, straining against its energy bonds. The wires hummed, and the lights in the tunnel behind Leo flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. Except for the machine's malevolent glow, the machine was failing. A century of neglect had taken its toll. The prison was breaking. Whispers filled the air, not from one place but from everywhere at once. They were the echoes of every laugh, every scream, every happy memory the entity had ever consumed, now twisted into something mocking and cruel. Shadows peeled away from the walls, moving with purpose, taking the forms of the carousel horses, of dancing couples, of a beckoning clown, all rendered in shifting. Liquid darkness. The main energy cage flickered and died. The entity poured forth. It was a wave of absolute cold and despair. It didn't move toward Leo. It simply was everywhere, filling the space, its presence a weight that sought to crush his spirit and freeze his heart. Leo stumbled backward, the flashlight dancing wildly. The whispers were in his head now, showing him visions. His grandfather, young and terrified, helping to lead a crying man in a fairground uniform toward the machine. The entity's form briefly solidifying around the man, whose face went blank. With bliss before dissolving into light, this was what his grandfather had tried to contain. This was the truth beneath the merriment. The shadows converged on him, their touch like ice. He felt a pull, not on his body, but on his very self, sapping his will, his memories, his joy. He was being unmade, his essence prepared to be another course for the starving beast. His hand closed around the brass token in his pocket, his grandfather's admission to this nightmare. It was warm, he understood. The machine was a lock. The token was a key dot with the last of his strength, fighting against the paralyzing cold. Leo lunged for the machine's control panel. He couldn't repair it, but he could reboot it. He found a slot, ornate and exactly the size of the token. As a shadowy hand of pure despair reached for his throat, he slammed the token home. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then light, pure, white, and silent. The gears shrieked into reverse, the glass orbs flared. The entity, now a vortex of screaming darkness, was wrenched backward, pulled inexorably into its core. The shadows were sucked away from Leo, from the room drawn back into the cage. The energy bars restabilized with a deafening thumb. Silence. Leo collapsed, gasping on the cold stone floor. The machine was quiet again, the counter reset, the entity contained. But it was weaker than before. The prison wouldn't hold forever. He sat in the profound silence, the only light from his fallen flashlight. He knew now what lay beneath the old world fairgrounds. It was the cost of manufactured joy. It was the hunger waiting in the dark. And he knew his grandfather's command was not a warning, but a charge. He would not let it out. He would become the new keeper of the gate. The merry music above had stopped, and Leo understood his life's purpose had just begun, down here in the silent, terrible dark.